Okay, sorry, I interrupted. What were you saying?
Actually, I say that natural law actually dictate that abduction of animals in plain sight actually is punishable by fine or sometimes even imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, for me, it also goes into the like topics of how, like, as humans, we've kind of made distinction between animals, like the type of animals that get protections and the animals that
Yes, that's
don't. Like with cats and dogs, like you can be like, oh, but like someone like if you hear someone killed a cat or a dog, like there's a completely different reaction than if you hear, oh, like the local like butcher killed like a cow or like a chicken that like we're eating right now.
yeah. Or if a hunter kills a deer.
Yeah, so it's like we make distinction between what animals deserve to have rights and what animals are just like free game for us to exploit.
Mm-hmm. And like also, I read something on the news with like some researchers using like puppies in their experimentation, and like everybody is mad about that. But you don't see anybody saying, or not anybody, but like you don't see a bunch of people getting mad at people for using mice or rats for experimentation, right? So clearly we.
I mean, I love rats and mice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is sometimes an end to a means almost with the testing on them. The reason they are used is because they can breed fast and because they're small, they're easy to keep,
Yeah.
easy to experiment on, close to humans. Like, we shouldn't cause them unnecessary suffering, but like one could say if it helps humans, like helps less humans suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Like cosmetic testing, that could be avoided easily. Like for cancer stuff, like that might be important research. I bet all the COVID vaccines being tested on mice and rats first.
Yeah, definitely. But I think like a lot of like obviously I am for animal testing, but a lot of people will say that like animal testing is not even that effective and that we can't really tell much from the fact that a drug works on a mouse, for example. And like we will protect certain like I there are plenty of benefits to testing on mice and rats over other animals, but there are also other benefits with testing animals that we don't allow anymore. So like I'm pretty sure it's illegal to test on primates now, even though that's like as close as we're gonna get, right? Okay, so to talk about agriculture for a bit, I think one of the biggest things in animal ethics is we should stop eating them. Right? Like vegans and vegetarians like often are change their diet because they think it's unethical to consume animal products. So what do you guys think?
I think we should reduce our consumption of animals from an environmental standpoint, which is an entirely different debate. But other animals eat animals. So
Okay, right. But this seems just like a convenient thing for us to do, right? Like we're
well,
like
no, that's why I'm saying we should reduce it. It should be more like something special, or like it shouldn't be like an everyday thing.
so like humans will say, "Oh, we're allowed to eat animals because other animals eat animals." But then we're like, "But we deserve more rights because we're not animals." So it doesn't seem actually fair to claim that. Like I think the way that we get those animal products plus the fact that we don't need them nutritionally anymore are two
I think
factors that like animals don't even have to consider, right?
well, what I'm saying is I'm not morally against actually eating the animals, like the act of eating animals. I'm saying it is immoral the way we treat them currently.
Yeah, I agree with Emma. Actually, if you look at the food production industry this time, at the current time, there are actually a lot of cruelties involved. Like if you look at the chicken, actually, in order to make them more, more productively to be served, to serve as dishes, actually they're injected like antibiotics or whatever, and raised in dark environment their whole life. They're kind of they couldn't even stand on their own because they have they're just trying to be mutated to have so many meat, and their bones just couldn't bear that meat weight. So I think like if we are on the so from an ethical level, if we are on the demanding side, it's kind of justified to say that we are equally evil as those who are involved in the production. But on the other side, yeah, I also agree that like since animals are also eating animals, it's kind of serves as a justification for human being because when you are doing, actually, you have to remind yourself that actually you're dealing with a species that are not necessarily sharing the same moral standard as you do. And when you are dealing with that, actually you shouldn't like apply your moral standards squarely on those species. And sometimes it's actually your privilege to consider like what's your benefit and what's your responsibility.
Yeah. So like, but if we do accept that animals have a right to life and not to be harmed, and humans like in modern day, we can get all those nutrients from other sources, and like we are in turn like giving people or like giving the agriculture industry more incentive to keep producing by purchasing their products. I think like we do have some level of responsibility that's much higher than what other animals should feel when they eat another animal, because it's really not the same thing. If you're like going out and hunting your own food, then that's like a different story. But like the way that we consume animals kind of makes it morally iffy.
I mean, personally, I kind of think that the view of animals like having rights and things like that, I think it's like it might be more cultural because I'm Nigerian, and the way we view like eating animals, or at least like animals versus like humans, is not in the same way of oh like cruelty or like harming them, because at least from my like the way I look at it is that we humans, it's that we've gotten to a point where we have the infrastrucures and the tools and the mechanisms and systems to be able to like number one like get these animals like breed them and reproduce them and like care for them and like package and distribute and like get like we have these systems that enable us to be able to like produce and eat these animals. But I'm sure that there's a time back in, I don't know, like whatever ice age, whenever, where humans were like the source of food for other animals. Like before we had learned to be able to place ourselves in a position where we're not being eaten or the ones doing the eating. So I think that maybe it's not necessarily a thing of other animals like, oh, animals eat each other, so therefore we can also eat animals. It's more the fact that we like as a species have like created like systems and like equipments that allow us to be able to eat those animals. Whether or not that's like ethical or moral, I'm not I don't that's not like the conversation I'm having, but it's just like the fact that we are able to do so because we've created those systems.
Right. So like we deserve a little bit of credit for being able to like come up with this huge system for being able to like consume all these animal products so simply. But like I think maybe we have to be responsible also for the fact that we created a system that is cruel. Like we do have the option for making more kinder ways of like distributing and like getting these products to consumers, but we choose not to because that means it costs more money, right? So how okay is it for us to continue to consume animal products knowing that we're feeding into the system that allows for cruelty to keep going?
I mean, I think that's more a byproduct of like capitalism, because I would say that the main reason why like this inhumane like systems of food and like animal product production is mostly because someone wants to protect their bottom line. So I think it has more to do with like, I mean, obviously we have a responsibility to be like more ethical consumers and like actually checking and seeing where our food is from. But for example, like I'm on campus, I don't know where the chicken or the pork or whatever like animal products that are being served in the cafeteria come from. But at the same time, if they're obtained unethically, I'm so complicit because I'm eating it, even though technically I don't necessarily like have a direct say in choosing it. But I think that I mean the most ethical way, even though technically in my opinion, like if you're still killing and eating an animal, I'm not sure how ethical you can make it because you can make them have as humane of a life as possible, but the act of killing them and eating them in some way, it's not humane to the animal in question. But I think being more conscious about where we get our food might be a step in like encouraging more ethical consumption.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And like this is a side note, like not about animal ethics, but about like sustainable agriculture. Like even if like every farm in the world like were to make an attempt to be more sustainable, like it cannot happen just because we don't like have enough like farmable land for us to produce the same amount that we're currently producing. So it's like not an option for us to improve on the system to a certain extent, at least from like a sustainability perspective. What were you gonna say before?
That wasn't important.
Okay. Okay, so like with this question on the right, like do you think there are any conditions where like it is ethical, or do you think like it's always ethical and what we are doing is fine as well?
I think it would be like, okay, part of me thinks that it's kind of ethical because like it's not I don't know how to word this because I don't think that it's ethical, but it could be like seen as such if it's like the animal doesn't know that it's going to be killed, right? Because it has no idea like about it can't grasp the concept of life, right? And like death and stuff. So like if you kill it, dude, it's like it was just existing and then you just kill it. And if you like honor its dead body and make use of all of its meat, like you just eat it all, that's fine, right?
Right, but I
Like
think the
you're
bigger problem though is like we raise them in such a way that their like life is freaking miserable.
well, that's when it would be unethical. I'm saying like if you
Right,
raise
so,
it
like,
to
in
have like
most
a good
cases,
solid life. Huh?
like, most of the meat you are eating is like from a source like that.
Yeah, I know, but that's when it would be unethical for like eating meat. I'm talking like if it's like at like a on like a smaller scale, I guess, not like in or like in an idealist point of view. I don't know if that's I don't know.
Actually, I think that if you look at the broader picture, the socio-economic system, especially the capitalism that we are thriving on, actually this system actually has some self-correction method that you can use to, I don't know if the right word to put here, to atone your sins. For example, like you can retain your current demand level for meat because you have the right to pursue a better life. That is also one of your basic rights. But on the other hand, you should also be willing to like probably pay higher taxes to the government for them to increasing the regulations on the food supply side to make sure that the meat sources are especially those the animals are raised in a more humane environment. And I mean, with that said, the supply side might have to raise their price to like to stay afloat. But on the other hand, if you want to like better your life or to remain your current level of demand, you have to, given our current capitalism system, and you should also be able to afford higher price to keep that demand, to make sure that the animals on the other side are somehow guaranteed some of their basic right.
Yeah. And like, but also like another problem that arises from that is like the average consumer doesn't want to pay more for it, even if it means that it's more sustainably produced, right? Because like we have more sustainable options now and like more humane options now. And like most people will not turn to those options just because they are more expensive. And that's just like how it has to be. So like another thing we might want to consider is maybe we all don't have that much responsibility to be that ethical of consumers because like wait, what was I gonna say? Like in the end, what you want to do for yourself, like your right to just like consume what you want might override the right to like for animals to like not be harmed in the process of getting those products to you, because like you're not even the one that is causing them harm directly, right? Like how much responsibility do you even have if you're just going to the store, buying it, and then cooking it and eating it? I would argue that you have less responsibility than the people that are in those systems.
I mean, at least what I want to comment is that with at least like ethical consumption, I mean, I don't necessarily think that it has to be this huge overhaul of just not eating animal products that were like grass fed and like free range and like all those things. But I think maybe at least as like human beings, like we don't have to eat as much animal products as we currently are. Like we can like adopt a sort of like cycle of, or maybe at least 1 or 2 vegan or vegetarian like meals a day, or like maybe you have 1 week where you just do like vegan or vegetarian meals just to ensure that your animal consumption is not like more than it's needed to be. And then also like kind of considering like socioeconomic barriers and how that might affect ethical consumption, because I know for like a lot of people, like a very cheap like source of like protein is literally like eggs, and we, at least I'm aware of how unethical and how poorly those chickens are treated for like their eggs and their poultry, or like dairy, and like that industry itself is terrible. But for people in low socioeconomic like areas, like those are cheap ways to get those proteins, and they may not be able to afford the protein powders from like peas or like the supplements. So I think we also have to, I think maybe we as a society, but we're not the ones controlling the means of production, but we need to find ways to make like sustainability and ethical consumption much more accessible from a price point. Because I think Shane, you like mentioned it, how like it's more expensive to get those like ethically produced like animal products, and how like that might be a huge barrier for a lot of people who might want to do ethical consumption but just can't afford it.
Definitely. Okay, so these are some other things about animal rights that I think we should talk about. Like, I know we already touched on the research thing, but like, what about animals that we use for just like entertainment's sake, right? Like in circuses or in movies, or like at SeaWorld and all of that, or like zoos, aquariums, petting zoos, like all of that.
I think that's definitely inhumane. Unless it's like a sanctuary
Mhm.
that's like well run. But like petting zoos, for example, like circuses, the animals did, you know, that like we all know that they didn't consent to that. and like they're just being taken out of their natural habitat for our viewing pleasure. I just think it's like wrong. And usually they're treated poorly.
Also use that logic to say that like
We can't
eating
eat them.
animals is bad as well though.
They don't consent to being eaten. They also don't consent to being put in sanctuaries. So
Well, I do think that eating animals is bad to some extent because we're omnivorous. Like we don't need to. We can function fully off of being vegetarian or vegan. But yeah, I think it's inhumane.
Yeah.
I definitely think animals for entertainment is inhuman because it's really unnecessary. Like I don't see why. At least for food, you could say they're like argue that there may be vitamins or something you can only get from animal products. But I don't see any reason why they're there for entertainment. That's just
Yeah.
unnecessary to me.
So I guess what we're saying is then that like when we use animals for entertainment, it's even less necessary than us eating them. Because like to a certain extent, a lot of people do kind of have to turn to animal products to get nutrition. But like entertainment is just like not as important of a thing. Like just in general, like we don't need entertainment to survive, right? And I don't really feel like animals are that entertaining in the grand scheme of things. So it's just like an unnecessary thing.
So actually, I have a little question. If like for some very weird people who think that animal entertainment is probably the most happiest thing in their life,
Yeah.
then do you think they have the right to
That's a good question.
capture animal and raise that?
So I guess we need to think about that further because like if they think that animal entertainment is as important as they think eating animals is, then like obviously if you can't accept that we shouldn't eat meat, then they also shouldn't accept that they can't use animals for entertainment, right? But I guess anyone else have any other thoughts?
I mean, mine is just I just have a question to who the person like finds so much pleasure in animals is like wondering like what is the state of their life? Because I personally can't see an instance or a situation where like watching an animal juggle or like perform like baseless tricks is like someone's like peak like source of pleasure. Like
Right, but like theoretically, if that were the case, can we even hold them accountable for wanting that if they want it as much as they want to eat meat? Like how come we can consume meat, but they can't use animals for entertainment if it's as important to them?
I mean, I think they can do it. Like it's a free country, as people like to say. They can do whatever they
Like
want.
why would it be more morally wrong to use animals for entertainment than it is to eat them?
I mean, for me, I wouldn't say it's morally wrong, but I judge them. Like me judging them doesn't.
Okay.
I think if you look at it like from a utilitarian perspective, like entertainment causes like much less unhappiness than like killing an animal.
Right. So
Yeah.
in one way, like the animals that are being used for entertainment are treated so well, not actually, but like in comparison to the animals that we eat. So like general animal happiness is definitely better for entertainment than for food. But for some reason we're saying, oh, it's better to just eat them instead of using for them for entertainment. And that's only because we think it's so important to eat animal products, right?
I mean, the thing is, at least with the videos I've seen about the animals that perform, I'm not sure that I would interpret their lives as being better because at least with how they're taught those tricks, they don't learn it. And like most of the time, like the way they're taught is not with like a treat or reward type system. They're like maybe being like chained or shackled or like beaten. Like if they get tricks wrong, they're like punished. Or for a lot of, at least with the ones I've seen, they tend to be like a state of like hunger, like starvation, like not being well or properly taken care of. So at least the ones I've seen. So I don't know. Maybe we should give an argument that we shouldn't eat or use animals for entertainment.
Yeah. So, but I do still think that animals, like entertainment animals, are treated better than the animals that we eat, just because like the conditions they're under, like the conditions that like chickens are under and like pigs are under are like really, really bad. Like even just in terms of like the space they have to occupy, like I realize that obviously animals, entertainment animals are not given enough space like at all, like to any extent, but it's still more than what an animal for food would be given.
I think for
Yeah, go ahead.
both entertainment and farming, there is a moral way to do it, but there's no way humans ever will.
You don't think so? Why?
It's, well, I don't know, maybe in like a very long time, but who knows if we'll be around that long.
So like
Just
what
because
do you think would be an ethical way to use animals for entertainment?
I mean, when you watch a dog agility show, do you think those dogs are being abused?
Okay,
Because that's,
it can also go into our pets argument. Like, in a way, they're only doing, like, do they really want to do those things?
I think dogs, well, and other animals, but I'm specifically going to talk about dogs because I know that for sure. They want a task to do sometimes. They, like, there's not proper ways to train them to do that, like hitting them, but also I've used an electric collar on my dog, so I can't really, because it wasn't safe for him not to wear an electric collar.
But
like there's a balance.
We can also argue though that the act of having a pet and like training it in general is like a kind of unethical thing in and of itself.
Well, that would really fuck up my whole life, wouldn't it?
And why would you say that's unethical?
Because like they're essentially living in submission to us, right? Like we control or like pretty much every aspect of their lives, and like we wouldn't think of that as okay to do to another human, but like why can we do that to certain pets that we find cute?
I think we do that to kids.
Yeah.
Like you could go as far, like your argument can go as far as to say like it's unethical to discipline your children because they're human beings. Like it's like those free range kids or whatever. It's stupid, but
I'm not
actually, I think there's a
I'm
distinction.
just saying like it's something to consider, because like they, like when you have a child, like it's a little bit different from like going somewhere and like getting a dog, right? Or like when the first dogs were like domesticated, like you're just taking some wild animal and going like, okay, you're like my property now. Like there's something iffy about that, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree
Well,
that there's a distinction here, because like if you are raising your child, I think very few parents are disciplining their child for their own entertainment. But actually, if you think about like raising a pet or for public exhibition, you're actually trying to cater to the audience's laughing point, and that from that perspective, then definitely disciplining your child is much more ethical.
Yeah.
Well, was your your argument, Lucia, was like what was it? Like how children have like there's a difference between like disciplining a child and training a pet. Because like we're taking a pet from like the wild that doesn't belong to us. But what about like an adopted child? They still learn discipline from their not biological parents.
Okay, maybe the point that Chen made was like a better distinction. Like why do you train a pet? You just train it so you can be like, okay guys, everyone gather around and watch my dog do this thing. Like there's nothing that the dog benefits from that besides the fact that like they get a treat after.
No,
On to that,
I disagree.
like do something similar with like children too. Like in 4th grade, I
Yeah.
had to like be in like some play in elementary school.
Right, but like you can argue that's like a learning experience, right?
I disagree. My dog and many dogs, the way we have them now, they do not function independently.
Yeah,
Like,
we made that happen in the first place.
yeah, so what, we can't go back now. Like it'd be cruel to not anymore. Think of all the sad puppies in the shelter.
Yeah, I know, but like they exist
Also, I think that
because of our like, want to like.
well, yeah, but what are we gonna do about that now? Nothing.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to like offend you. I'm just saying like.
I'm not offended,
Dude,
bro.
I'm not saying that
Lucia.
like my point is like we're only at this point because of unethical reasons in the first place, and maybe it's better for us to discourage this kind of stuff in the future. Maybe like I think.
Well, yeah, we shouldn't be domesticating any more animals.
Right, but we are.
Actually, I think domesticating animals actually is also a little different from using them as entertainment. Like domesticating animals, sometimes you also want to better your animal's life, and it's actually out of good wish. But I mean, if you are using them for entertainment, then there is no way that you are actually doing it for good reason.
Right. So would you agree then that like pets are just like another form of entertainment for us?
No, I think pets are totally different category.
Why?
Because if you are raising a pet, sometimes, I mean, basically you're still trying to improve your own well-being. But on the other hand, if you're really a responsible pet carer, then you will certainly also prioritize their own happiness. For example, I know someone who raised like Border Shepherd. You know, it's a very intelligent dog, and yeah, you can't simply, and especially for those experienced dog carriers, when they're raising this kind of dog, it's actually a very intellectually challenging exercise. And yeah, they're still willing to do that because they develop like certain empathy and love for their pet, and they certainly want a better life for their pet rather than just maintain, you know, just to put it for entertainment or just lock it up and you won't get into any
Okay,
trouble.
yeah.
They're not.
I
see what you're saying, but like the reason we own pets is not like the primary reason is not really for their benefit. Like I think everyone like has to agree with that.
well, I feel like it started.
Love your pet and you want what's best for it, but that's only in turn because you benefit from it.
Then actually, if we're following this logic, then actually if parents want to raise kids, then they're actually not necessarily like only for their kids' benefit. You want to have child because you want someone like for company or for whatever. But actually, I mean, after you give birth to a child, you definitely feel that responsibility. You feel that responsibility to better their life. But before you even consider like having a kid, at that time, your priority is only your own well-being. That's my.
But I think maybe there are certain distinctions between like us having children and us like having pets. Like the sole like fact that they are our like animals is different from like us like actually reproducing and creating another human life, right?
I mean, but for me, the thing is that, like we're saying that because it's for our benefit, it's like not as ethical. But I would say a lot of the things that we as humans do that like end up like working well is usually from selfishness. Like even though like the purpose of getting a pet was for like the selfish purpose of I want companionship. It'll be nice to have a cute thing to play with or like something to like take care of. Like that comes from a selfish place. But the end result is that this animal now has housing, shelter, food, like care, someone that like puts time and effort into taking care of it. And then the animal itself also has companionship, at least with good pet owners. So I would say it like the motivation for owning pets not necessarily being from a selfless point of view. I don't think that necessarily negates the fact that it also has a positive like impact or work for the pets as well because it's
Right. So I think the question is like, how much are we actually benefiting them, or like benefiting animals in general by owning them?
Well, if they're already domesticated, I think we are benefiting them. I think a dog is better off in somebody's home being fed and taken care of than outside alone
Yeah,
or in a shelter. And in terms of whether we benefited like wolves or like that animal group, I think it started more as a mutual relationship of like, you're gonna help me hunt and like bark if there's animals, and then we'll feed you food. What it has evolved into
I think
like is different.
well, actually, I think some of Lucy's concerns are already incorporated in some of nowadays guidelines. For example, like if we're trying to domesticate a wild wolf, then actually that's mostly considered unethical because the domestication of wildlife is like there are tons of scientific research into that, like how much harm it could actually cause to our ecosystem or cause to the animals themselves. But yes, I also agree with Emma that if they're domesticated, then
Yeah.
it's reasonable to say that it's also out of your sincere wish that you want to better their life. Although you will never know whether their life are really better because unless you can do a survey on them, which is unlikely, but still it's reasonable to believe that their life are better.
So like another question I wanted to ask is like, is extinction of certain species even bad? And why?
From humans, like caused by humans?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but why?
we should preserve biological diversity.
But why? Like, what is there inherently good about biological diversity?
It keeps an ecosystem that we also live in functioning properly.
Okay, but like at a certain point, we won't need those ecosystems anymore. So,
Well, you mean like when we all die because the planet gets too hot? Or like,
no, like as in we can do without certain plants, not plants, I mean animals. Like certain
yeah,
species
but
go.
why would we intentionally do that?
Well, I'm not saying we intentionally are. It's just like if their extinction is like a result of our carbon emissions, for example, like is that even why we should be worried about climate change, or like what is it about like a species not existing anymore that's like bad?
For me, I don't think it's necessarily about the ecosystem or things like that. Like from my perspective, it's just the idea that like we as like one species like have wreaked so much havoc that we're literally like wiping out like the other species that like share the same earth with us. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily about like ecosystems. Like that is also important because that affects everyone. But it's also about the fact that just the amount of like havoc we've like wrecked on the earth that it's literally like we're getting to the point where we're like looking for other planets to go to because of like how badly we like treated the one that was given to us. So it's just, I don't know, it just seems
But I
unfair.
think a lot of that is we're worried for ourselves because our environment is bad, not because we're causing species to die out, right? Like it's not the extinction that's the problem, it's like the planet getting warmer that is the problem.
Which is causing extinction though, so it's like a symptom
Right.
of the issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like the extinction is not the bad part then. It's the
Yeah.
climate change that is the bad
I
part
guess,
in
like,
that case.
We try to prevent extinction because it's a sign that we're doing something better for the environment.
I would say for me, it's not the climate change that's bad, it's the fact that we're the cause of like these animals getting wiped out. Like it's single-handedly, like we're the single like factor like behind all of it. So it's not the fact that climate, like I would say extinction is the bad thing because it's our actions that are wrecking the habit.
So if it was like another, like one animal hunting another animal to extinction, would you think that's bad or?
It should be, right? Like why else, why are we punishing ourselves more than we would another capable animal? Like, for example, if ants are so cool. If we see ants doing like war and stuff, I personally am impressed with them and I'm like, wow, go you guys. But then when humans do the same thing, I'm like angered by that. But like, why? We're just like good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a thing of like, I think it's just the fact that we as humans are like wrapped up about ourselves and in ourselves. Like if it's like it's also the idea of like using pets for entertainment, like kind of like when they're doing it, like it's funny, it's cute. But if you have like a 2-year-old like that is being trained to like do tricks and things like that, like humans would have a completely different reaction than when you see like a pet monkey or a pet dog doing the same tricks. So like obviously like with seeing the like ants, and for me I've also been watching a lot of videos of like wolves hunting other animals, or, like lions and things like that. So like seeing that I'm like, wow, like that's great skill. But if I saw another human being doing that, I wouldn't like have the same reaction. But I also think that's mostly because of the socialization that we've had. Like to see the idea of like hurting other human beings to be a terrible thing to do. I don't think it's necessarily like naturally ingrained in us. It's the fact that like we've gone to schools and like we basically have these lessons that shows that war isn't necessarily the best thing for us to do, like as humans. I think it's mostly socialization that makes us think, oh, that's cute for animals, and ooh, that's bad for humans.
I also agree. I think like we view the extinction of different species differently. It's mainly it's actually the very core of the problem that we discussed today is that how much like how much do you value animals' rights or humans' rights? If we're talking about extinction of the species, then to be honest, the evolving of the human being itself involves the like extinction of many species. Think about our predecessors, where we come from. Like all those species are not classified as human beings at the beginning, but they extinct whatsoever. But when you are looking at someone like, for example, if you're talking about climate change, it's definitely causing a dramatic impact on some Pacific island countries. If you go there, you'll see that some islands of their habitat are almost like totally submerged under sea level. And yes, you are actually what you are doing are like causing their extinction. Then you can definitely relate to them more than a species, a random species that you probably haven't heard of.
Anyone have anything else to add?
Like as for the extinction question, I don't know why, but my intuition feels like there's something different between a human caused extinction and just like a completely an extinction that would have happened regardless of human
Yeah.
interference. It's kind of like pandas, for example, and how they're still endangered despite, or like almost endangered despite all of humanity's best efforts to like make them mate or like figure things out. It's just because they're like, they have no
Not good at
desire to
being
keep,
them.
to
So
stay alive.
stupid.
Yeah, like they're so selective with what they eat. They just sit on their babies sometimes and just suffocate them. Like, is this a species that we should actually like try to keep alive, or should we just
Like, what is the point, really?
yeah,
in
like
that?
if we believe in natural selection, then we should let them die out because they're just like
I think
not good.
I think like the reason why like human caused extinction is like worse than like natural extinction or like an extinction caused by another animal is like humans have the ability to prevent these things, and we have all the knowledge necessary to prevent all these bad things from happening. And yet if we like refuse to do so, then there's something wrong with that, because like obviously animals are harmed in the process of animals going extinct, but like the natural world and like other animals can't really help other animals do better, right? Because that's just like everyone's just doing their own thing. But like humans have the ability to prevent those things from happening. So like by us causing an extinction, then that means we are knowingly performing an immoral act, whereas like other animals like aren't tied by morality or anything because they just can't think about it.
I would say I partly agree with this argument that human definitely has superior power in terms of preventing other species from extinction. But on the other hand, is there any necessity to use this superior power to protect a species that is doomed by the environment to extinct? I mean, that's kind of I mean, I don't have a definite answer for that, but I think it's definitely an open question. Like, so as a both sides probably have some very powerful arguments.
Yeah, so it's like obviously kind of hard because in theory, humans have the power to like solve most problems, right? But how worth it is the question.
I would say that if you think about it, if protecting any animals that you can is sort of a moral principle, and if this principle was actually established like 20,000 years ago, then there wouldn't be any more than human beings at all, because the emerging of more than human being actually come at the cost of the extinction of your predecessor species. So I sort of think of it in that way, that I generally don't think that human actually has a responsibility to protect the animal to protect any species from extinction. But on the other hand, I mean, if you know that what you are doing are directly causing their extinction, then you should think otherwise, because human is definitely sort of a dominant factor here in our ecosystem.
Yeah, so maybe we can say that it's like morally permissible to not act to keep certain species from going extinct, but like it's just a jerk move to like not. Especially in the case where it will have like a domino effect on other species and then in turn also have an effect on us and like therefore cause like a bunch of harm. So like if we let pandas go extinct, it's like kind of whatever. It's not good, but it's not necessarily super morally heavily wrong.
Wait, is it not morally wrong just because like we don't benefit from them?
Like what we were saying is that like allowing an animal to go extinct is not in and of itself morally incorrect, but it's it's morally permissible to not do anything about it, but it's like not nice essentially. So like, does that answer your question?
It's like the trolley question where it's like it's also morally permissible to let more people die if that was what was gonna happen. Like,
So like there's no actual answer to the
Yeah.
trolley problem, so it's like,
But
but it's kind of like abortion in the sense that some people might say it's morally permissible to have an abortion, but it's like not actually a thing that you should consider as a good action.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like with that philosophy of like, or that attitude of inaction is equal to action, like
I don't.
it seemed like we kind of thought that was the case for a trolley problem and some other issues. But I don't know. I feel like we're also so biased in this conversation just because there is no one here who is vegetarian or vegan. Because like it feels like it's something that's so important to my lifestyle or identity, something that I do not want to
Right,
give
and we
up.
can argue that that part of your lifestyle is more important than like harming animals in the end.
Like I'm just so reluctant to even think that it's particularly that harmful because I just like to keep doing what I'm doing
Yeah.
without having moral repercussions. Which is bad in and of itself, but
To be honest, I don't think that including or not including vegans or people with special beliefs are necessarily reducing the bias, because if you think about it, they're choosing their path because like
And
they
they're
also have a very strong predisposed value
I guess
than
we-
not necessarily justified by ethical logics or whatever.
Yeah, I guess we're saying that like we have less representation here right now for those groups, and like people might have more to say about this because they might know more about how animals are harmed in this sense.
there might be something that we're like just glossing over or forgetting to include because we don't care enough to find something that changes our like
Yeah,
how we eat.
I don't know. I feel bad saying this, but I've watched a lot of those like documentaries and stuff, and I have not changed my lifestyle. So like, I guess I am placing my own desires above all those animals that I've eaten. And I just like feel guilty about it, but also it's not changing anything. So
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't like I did sort of change my lifestyle. I don't really eat red meat or pork like very often,
yeah.
which is better than to some if we're like than eating all of it, you know? So, but yeah, it definitely could be better.
Mhm.
But also I have like a whole thing against like personal change is not gonna fix the world.
Right, but this isn't about fixing the world. It's about like you as an individual being a moral person.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't.
I totally agree. Like, actually, I kind of come up with a very simple solution that you admit that eating red meat is immoral, but yeah, actually being immoral on this single aspect doesn't harm my ability of being a moral person overall. So
Right,
Yes.
like it's something you could do to be more moral. So like
I feel like
actively
I brought
not
this
doing
up.
it is kind of bad.
The Good Place is a show. on Netflix, and it talks about a lot of this. And there's this one episode where there's this guy who tries to be the most moral person ever, and like, because in it, like, the whole premise of the show is that you're like given points based on what you do during your life, and when you die, that decides where you go. And then in the second season, there was this guy that tried to like not do anything bad, so like he wouldn't step on bugs and stuff, and it was just like it's almost impossible to be completely moral in today's society.
I mean, at least for me, I think to be honest, I think the definition of what we consider moral is like very subjective and personal. Because for me, I wouldn't say that like my choosing, like if I decided to like not eat meat, I don't think I would view that as something that now makes me moral. So at least for me, I kind of value more like being like kind and compassionate and like moral towards my fellow humans to be like way a little higher than being quote unquote moral, like as a with respect to animals. So I just think that morality is very subjective.
Yeah, plus it's like, I don't know, this whole concept of should animals have rights, whatever rights we grant to animals is just going to be something that's more beneficial to us. Like, I forgot which philosopher it was, but someone said we should try to make humans be nice to animals just because that's like kind of a reflection on how humans treat other humans. It's kind of like how like killers usually start by like torturing animals or killing animals and then move on to like people. And so like I don't know, I feel like this whole topic is just so like human oriented. No matter how we decide how much better we decide to treat animals, it's always just going to be from the lens of is this better for me morally? Is this better for society?
Yeah, right. But like that still doesn't mean that we shouldn't.
Yes, but it's like I don't think the animals are going to be affected one way or the other.
But they are, because then we'll stop like housing them so awfully.
Yeah.
Will we?
I mean, if we were more moral, yeah.
Well,
I'm not saying it's actually going to happen. I'm saying like if
everybody would have to stop eating, or like, oh, like a lot of people would have to do that for them.
I'm not saying it's plausible or that it's going to happen. It's like I'm just saying if it.
I think the way to go is regulation, which we can't.
It's not like it can't happen with like the amount of people that love meat though.
Actually, regulation is based on the assumption that people are acting on their worst motives. So yeah, we can act what we want, but on the other hand, you should be willing to embrace some regulations.
Does anyone remember when Cory Booker was still running for president and like Fox News, had an entire segment about how he's going to take hamburgers away? Like I just found that conversation so hilarious. Just like wow, there's all in America, burgers is where you draw the line.
What was it that they said he was going to take away? Sorry.
Because like Cory Booker, I think he's vegan or vegetarian. So like with usual like fear mongering, they're like, oh, he's gonna make it illegal to eat hamburgers because he says the cows are farting too much, or like, and it's just like, it's just so absurd.
Yeah, but that only just like proves how much people would hate that if it were to like how far we can't even regulate that far, because even if we tried to, it would just end up angering like 99% of the population. Like I would be mad too. Also, you mentioned like the psychology of inaction versus action thing, and I still cannot figure out if it's the same or not, because so much of it is just like psychological. Like we only think that action is worse than inaction because we feel worse when we act, and that's just like a thing.
Yeah. This is a more difficult topic than I expected it to be.
Yeah. Now it sounds like I'm being sarcastic, but like thank you guys for being so talkative today.
Yeah, like this is
Like I know
actually-
we're all quiet right now, but like it was been a good discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like,
Sorry, guys, I need to leave first. I have to catch up with another discussion session.
It's okay.
we're pretty much done. We just have like
Bye.
bye. So we just have 5 more minutes. So I guess
Bye.
do announcements.
Okay, yeah, we'll just do announcements then. Okay, so these are the next 3 meetings that we have coming up. I am especially excited for the December 3rd one. Next week's meeting is only going to be an hour long because I have a physics exam, sadly, again. And then the next one will be on antinatalism, immoral births, and selective abortion, which are all like super, super interesting things to talk about. So there's like a week between those 2 weeks, which is like Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
so
we're not meeting that
then. And then December 10th, we'll talk about the experience machine and like what it means to like live well. So yeah. And also these are all like forms that you can find on our website. I know a couple of us are new members, so if you guys have any topics you want to suggest, and then there's a form for that. And for like we do Netflix parties like every 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So if you have any suggestions for what we should watch and then discuss later, then that's a thing. And also if you want a pin,
Oh,
if you want like a little button, they're
yeah, like-
free.
like that.
So just like put your name and address in the form and we can deliver it to you.
That's what it looks like. Very cute. All right.
All right, thank you everybody for coming.
I look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh wait, I gotta stop the recording.